All right, I think that's it for this evening. So we're at that part of the meeting where some guy's going to get up and talk. And I know that you all read Mitch's bio on the website. How many read it? Come on, read everything, and you know everything there is to know about Mitch. So I'm not going to tell you any of that stuff. I've known Mitch for about 10, 15 minutes. I mean, probably about 20 years. And normally I'd get up here and roast him, but what I want to say about Mitch is that what you'll discover about Mitch is that he is Mr. San Marino. He knows every one of your children. And he does that because he is uncompromising in his passion for what he does. Not only as a writer, but as a person. And that's why he's the announcer at so many of your children's events. But what I see is Mitch roots for the underdog. And if you've read his stories over the past 20 plus years, you'll see that there's a particular angle that he discovers in each one of those stories. And that angle is he roots for the underdog. He roots for people that overcome adversity, much like he has much adversity tonight. Because I'm sure that I've paid enough of you to throw things at him. So, without further ado, I'm introducing Mitch Lehman, Mr. San Marino.
Thank you, Kelly. That was very nice. It almost is going to keep me from telling my short jokes about you, but maybe not quite. Like I was going to tell one about Kelly's not short. I'm not saying Kelly's short, but if you look at the bottom of his driver's license photo, you can see his feet, you know. It's okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. So how do I handle this, Stephen? I don't know. What do I do? Just like point this at somebody?
Go
and
right.
Right? It says like here? Oh, the speaker, Mitch Lehman. Okay, we can stop there. What's everybody doing here, by the way? Is it like free meal night? I have no idea. But I do appreciate you all showing up. You know, I remember when my previous boss, Cliff Smith, spoke at City Club, and look, Mortimer just clutched his chest when he remembers Cliff Smith speaking at City Club, 20 years ago or something like that. And Cliff was here, and Scott Jenkins was here, who was on the school board. And Cliff had been kind of rough in the paper on the school board, and I went to Scott and I said, Scott, it's really great of you to come. I know you and Cliff don't always get along. He goes, oh no, I'm just here in case I have to defend myself. So I'm just kind of assuming that you guys are all here for the same reason, in case you have to defend yourself. So really glad to be here. I have a guest I want to introduce, Greg Johansson. Did I say it right, Johansson? Greg, that's the Rotary president. I know Rotary and City Club can sometimes be two different organizations, but Greg is here doing a great job at Rotary. Glad that you're here. You know, I talked to Lauren the other day, and Lauren said he's very sorry that he can't be here. And Lauren said, okay, Mitch, but try to keep your presentation short. So Lauren Kleinrock told me to keep it short. So in other similar news, Donald Trump texted me and told me to keep it classy. Steve told me to make sure my hair was brushed. And little Paul told me to hold it down to one soda. So that's the kind of advice that I've been getting. Okay, so let me just go right along here. Oh my gosh, here's Steve and his daughter Catherine. And Stephen helped me today get the photos ready. So I thought that I'd at least offer a little bit of a little courtesy. That's Stephen and his daughter from our last meeting, which was the Rose Court right here. In fact, you know, I didn't know that you guys had dinner at these meetings. I come here to like just cover them later on, and I had no idea that these things didn't start till like 7:30. So I'm getting to see all this whole new angle of City Club. So Stephen, thank you for your help. Okay, I am here to admit something that's kind of hard to do, but I've been holding on to this for 20 years, 19 years, as a matter of fact. So 19 years ago, San Marino was playing South Pasadena in basketball at South Pasadena. And I was there, and I was sitting on the floor in the baseline. You can see where I was sitting right there. See the score? South passes up 47-46 with 8 seconds left to go in the game. So when someone's like shooting foul shots, you're not supposed to take flash photography. And I sat there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try to affect this guy. So I took a flash photography, and he missed the foul shot. So he gets another one, so I take another shot, and he misses another one. Is that the same guy? Let me see. Oops. There we go. So he misses another one. There's a third photo that we don't have, but I took 3 pictures of this guy shooting foul shots, and he missed all 3. It wasn't enough for San Marino to beat them, but I want to admit that it's the only time ever that I've like blatantly cheated. It was in San Marino's favor, but they couldn't even win the game, but that's the way it goes. Okay, so Dennis, so I spoke at Rotary in August, on August 22nd, which was a Thursday. My mother passed away on August 20th, and I get up to speak, and Dennis goes, Mitch, I'm glad you're here and whatever. He goes, I just want to tell the audience that Mitch's mother just passed away a couple days ago. And I'm like, Dennis, I cry every time I speak anywhere. And you start by saying that my mother died? I go, what the heck are you doing? There's no chance I'm going to make it through this one. So it's the only time I've ever not cried throughout an entire speech. So I'm going to try to go with good luck again. So God bless you, Mom. Glad that you can see at least part of this. Jim, there's Jim Angelis. What a great president Jim was, wasn't he? He did a great job last year. That's right. And it does say, wait for applause. Jim is the only City Club president who's parlayed his position into a job as a stand-up comedian at the Lawrence Welk Resort. In fact, he's the only City Club president who's ever tried to parlay his presidency into a stand-up comedian at the Lawrence Welk Resort. But the good news for that is that a lot of people there are kind of, like timing impaired, I guess. And so the same punchlines work every single night. Take my wife, please. And they just laugh constantly, right? So I was sitting up here one time by the head table, and so Jim was like 10 jokes into his monologue. And Kelly like points his watch, goes, Jim, come on, for the speaker. And Jim goes, we have a speaker? So, yeah. And here's the aforementioned Dennis. Thank you, Dennis, for that wonderful introduction a couple months ago, which I've never gotten over. So what I'm going to get into later on is the top 10 stories that I've experienced here in San Marino. And you'd be astonished at the number of people who have reached out to me, texted me, called me, emailed me. I said, Mitch, how about this one? How about this one? And a lot of them are like, Dennis. They're like, Dennis has got to be one of the stories for throwing that bag of poop on that guy's yard, And I'm like, and they're like, this has gone like worldwide. That's got to be one of them. And I just want to say that Dennis, I believe, is somebody who is worthy of the top 10 story, but not for the reason that a lot of people think he is, because I've got 100 pictures of Dennis doing this, and that is giving money to charities. And every charity in the world, Dennis is so active. And so I don't think we all want to be judged on our worst day. I don't even think that was Dennis's worst day. But Dennis has done so much for this community. And, so Dennis is worthy of top 10 consideration, but not for the reason that a lot of people wish that he was. So this is a story that I wrote a couple years ago. And it's about a couple girls who went to San Marino High School. So if you look at the middle picture, the girl on the left, she's graduated on to college, and that's her sister on the right. And the story is sisterhood is a full-time job. It's not that, just kind of a neat story about them because they're on the tennis team together, and they're in Titan Shield together, and I'm an advisor for the Titan Shield newspaper, and they're in a couple clubs together, and so they were a senior and a freshman, and they were almost together all day, and I thought that was kind of a neat story about sisterhood as a full-time job. And the reason I really put it up there is the one on the left, she texted me, she saw that I was speaking, she goes, certainly my sisters and my story is going to be in your top 10. And I didn't have the heart to tell her no, so I'm going to present it here and say, it's under consideration. So she gets that much. So a couple years ago, San Marino, for graduation, 2016, they had a flyover. A guy from San Marino, Robin Howe, has a plane, and they flew over graduation. So they asked me to go on the rehearsal the night before. And I'm deathly afraid of flying, But I was in the process of getting over it and said, I'm going to do this. So he took me over to San Gabriel Airport. Is that San Gabriel? No, it's a country club. Is this it? I don't know. What's it called? El Monte. Thank you, Alex. And so, and by the way, that's a really comfortable thing to put on, by the way. I want to point that out. And there's Robin. He lives in San Marino. Great guy. That's the plane. And this is us flying over. And so you can see the school set up for graduation. You can see the chairs there, right? Like just below the logo. So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this, so I liked that it said experimental right in front of you. That was kind of neat when you're afraid of flying. So and here's one of the best moments of my life, and that was when we were landing, so that was kind of neat. One of the fun things that I got to do was work with Alec Baldwin one time. There's a fundraiser in San Marino for Danny's Farm. It's a charity, and Alec Baldwin came. And that was kind of neat. He's interesting fella. And so when I introduced him, so Alec Baldwin at one time, he said, that he would leave the country if George Bush got elected, and he never did leave the country. George Bush didn't get elected. And when I introduced him, I said, you know, we have one thing in common. We both promised to leave the country if certain presidents were elected, and neither of us did, but he didn't care for that too much. But he raised $50,000 for Danny's farm, and that's all that matters. So I used to like George Plimpton, and so I got into a little bit of like participatory journalism. And so I did this one thing, I called it the Sports Writers Challenge. And so I decided to take on a couple of different teams. And so one time I took on this guy, Brian Lowe, to shoot three-point baskets. And we shot 50 three-point baskets, and I made 22. I thought this was really good. It's like 44%. That's not bad for an old guy, too. And Brian Lowe made 39. I mean, so it's 78%. So I got smoked there. And before I entered into it, I said, okay, I'm going to publish the results no matter what. So this is San Marino's girls golf team at the time, who won the state championship, I want to point out. 5 of these girls are now playing college golf at, from right to left, Harvard, University of Denver, Oregon, Skip, I'm not doing anything, Skip, University of Chicago, and Occidental. So I golfed against them, and the worst thing that happened was they go, Mitch, which tee do you want to hit from? And I said, well, I'll hit from the white, and you guys hit from the red. And they said, no, we don't play the same tee. So I lost to every one of them, and I had to publish the scores in the Tribune, so that's one of the more embarrassing moments of my life, and they're all outstanding, obviously, if they're still playing golf in college. So City Club, I've been to a lot of them. Here's some of the speakers that have been here. That's Dan Guerrero. I think he was here for a sports night from UCLA. And saying UCLA City Club, you can expect like crickets from that. If this were someone from USC, it'd be the greatest one. And that's a guy named, I forget, he's from San Gabriel Country Club. What's his name? He's a former baseball player, I believe. Tom, do you know who that is? Tom Dukes. Tom Dukes, that's right. I was trying to remember his name. That's Steve Ralph, I think, the former president of Huntington Hospital. This is Chris McCarron, who is a really famous jockey. And he didn't have much of a sense of humor, but I realized that someone who eats 3 pieces of lettuce and a Brussels sprout per day is probably not going to have a lot of sense of humor. Our former fire chief, emergency things, Matt Ballantyne, former city manager, Howard Kazanjian, and Howard Kazanjian was the producer of Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he spoke here. And this is one of my favorites, Henry Bumstead. Henry Bumstead won 2 Academy Awards for like Vertigo and The Man Who Knew Too Much or something like that. And he was amazing. And Henry got up there and he stammered for like 5 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible. And then he started to go. And by the end, it was amazing. I like pull him off stage. He was really, really good. And Henry Bumstead told me something that's one of the funniest stories I've ever heard in my life. But Henry Bumstead actually worked on Slapshot, the movie, which is this like really sophomoric kind of a kid's movie and whatever. And he said, you know, Mitch, it's the damnedest thing. I've worked on all these movies with Alfred Hitchcock and Clint Eastwood. And he goes, and all anyone wants to talk about is Slapshot. And I said, yeah, that's pretty much the way things go. Hey, there's Little Paul. And I was hoping Little Paul would be here. That's right. Little Paul always gets a round of applause, doesn't he? That's our guy, Little Paul. Love Little Paul. Not here, unfortunately. There's Little Paul. Little Paul, this is at a party that I think Dennis organized for Little Paul. Little Paul at one point was supposed to leave home and go to a group home. And so they threw a party. Dennis was part of that. A big party for Little Paul at the fire station and the police station. And there were a lot of people there, and Little Paul was there, and Matt gave him this commendation or whatever. And so Little Paul went to the group home, and he woke up, and he said bye, and he walked out the front door. And he said, where are you going? He goes, I'm going to work, I'm going to Lazy Park. I said, well, no, you have to stay at the group home. And he went, and just left. And so he went and did it the next day, and he went, and he just left again. They said, well, you can't stay here. So Little Paul lasted like 2 days in the group home, and then he's back in San Marino. So there you go. This is Paul's his most recent birthday. So Paul's going to be 60 on May 1st. So save the date, and we're going to have another party for Little Paul. This is Chuck Henry. This is not speaking at City Club, but Chuck Henry, people like earlier, like 20 pounds ago for me, and a lot of shade of hair and shorter hair, used to confuse me for Chuck Henry. And I would be somewhere in the cinema, and they said, Chuck Henry. And so I was at a UCLA football game one time, and this woman walks up and she goes, I know you. And I go, you do? And she goes, yes. And I go, do you live in San Marino? And she goes, no. And I go, well, how do you know me? No, I'm using her voice for me. I said, how do you know me? And she says, I see you on television all the time. And I said, you get Channel 19? And San Marino used to have Channel 19 football in front. And she said, oh no, don't be coy with me. I go, honestly, I'm not being coy with you. I go, do you watch Titan football? She goes, oh, come on now. And so I started to walk away, and she goes, can I have an autograph? And I said, sure. So I signed Chuck Henry and left. This is one of the greatest people in San Marino history. What a gentleman, somebody who has given so much of his time and his effort to this community. And the guy on the left is Bill Steele. This is what a contrast. Look at the wild hair, the lousy shirt, and look at Bill Steele, always, buttoned up the way he always was. Bill Steele was a great guy. In fact, the Rotary teacher scholarships are named the Bill Steele teacher grants or something like that, but what a really neat guy. And I was looking through a bunch of pictures and I saw this Bill, and I wanted to share that with you guys. I was an English major in school. My favorite book was the Canterbury Tales, which I started reading in 4th grade. The teacher gave me Canterbury Tales. To read in 4th grade was kind of odd. And I loved it. And I did not find out until I was actually working in San Marino that the Huntington Library has the authoritative version of the Canterbury Tales, which were taken from Chaucer and taken to a monastery, and it was done by monks. And so if you go up there, they're there obviously. And they actually let me take the lid off the Ellesmere manuscript and take pictures of it. So that's actually like a shot of the Ellesmere manuscript that you don't usually get, which is kind of neat. That's Steve Tall stealing money from kids at grad night. Okay, it was November of 2013, and I was at a San Marino High School girls tennis match, and it was cold, and it was a playoff match. And I was sitting on this bench, and there was a book next to me, and I picked up the book. It was a big, thick English book, and I opened it up to see what they're reading. And I looked at the table of contents, and there was Death of a Salesman, which is my favorite piece of art that there is. And I had read it for 4 previous classes before that evening. And so I'm looking through the book, and I get to Death of a Salesman, and it's kind of marked up. And this girl comes over and sits down, and she's one of the tennis players who went and played 4 years at Princeton. And I go, Dorothy, is this your book? And she goes, what are you doing with my book? And I go, I was an English major. I look at all English books. And she goes, yeah. And I go, did you read Death of a Salesman? She goes, yeah. I go, did you like it? She goes, no. So I started to recite lines from memory from Death of a Salesman. She started to laugh. So I had a good moment with Death of a Salesman. So I thought about this, and I thought, this would be really fun to study Death of a Salesman with the high school students. So, as is typical when I get a good idea, I forgot about it for 8 months. And the following summer, I was in Lauren Kleinrock's office. He was interim something. He's always interim something. In fact, he's negotiating right now for an interim job of some kind. And he'll get hired, I guarantee you, and his pension will kick in again. And I said, Lauren, I have this idea. I want to go to San Marino High School and take AP Lit with the high school lit class. And I want to write stories about it. And Lauren goes, sounds like a good idea. We'll have to check with HR. Of course, we'll have to make sure that the parents all sign release forms. I said, do whatever you want to do. So we come with this plan. And so I went to AP Lit class for 7 weeks. And we read Death of a Salesman. We read it every day. We did poetry explications. It was really fun. I took all the tests. I had to write all the papers. I missed 1 class in 7 weeks. It was really fun. Got to know every one of these kids. I got to know all these kids. I think William Tam Robert, his son, is in here. I think I have another picture of him. But it was really, really neat. Really enjoyed it. I remember one day we'd done poetry explications. And I was home reading my poetry for the day. And I read this poem, and I'm like, wow, there seems to be a lot of sexual overtones in this poem. And many times in class, Dr. Beagle, and that is her in the top row to the left of me, and that is Robert Tam's son to my left, William Tam. And I said, there seems to be a lot of sexual overtones in this poem. And it had been discussed many, many times in the class, and I'd never really thought I wanted to talk about it. And so this one day we get to class, and Dr. Beagle brings up this poem, and she starts saying, whatever. She goes, anybody else? Is that it? And I go, excuse me, does anyone besides me think there's sexual overtones in this poem? And the biggest mistake I ever made. And they go, no. And I go, what about this, this, and this? And one girl screamed. I think, and that was it for discussing poetry for me for the rest of the week. I got to substitute teach, and I think Dr. Beagle couldn't come, so I taught a day. There's Will I Tam, isn't that your son? There he is, what a great guy. And there's Dr. Beagle. And so all these papers behind us are papers that we wrote for Death of a Salesman, and the book is open to Death of a Salesman. And I wrote 7 articles. It was nominated for an award. Didn't win, kind of story of my life, being nominated for it, not really winning a lot of them. But it was great. And I wrote a long story called Class is Missed. And that was the final story of the entire group of them. And I wrote a paragraph about each one of the kids. So one of the things that I wanted to do, okay, so I used to go second period, the class was third period, and I brought donuts a lot. And so this kid in the middle was in wrestling, that's Adam, and he couldn't eat donuts because he was trying to make weight for wrestling. And so I taunted him every day with all these donuts that off the ring. I made a vow that what I wanted to do to have the entire student experience was I wanted to go to an event for every student, an extracurricular event. So this is Oz, which was the show, and so I got all the girls flowers. This is a speech and debate class, and not all of them were in my class. And for the boys, I bought them all neckties, a blue striped necktie. And I was surprised that at graduation that year, several of them had that necktie on for graduation. And this is us, we call ourselves the cool kids, and we met every day at second period and waited for to go to lit class, and so that was a lot of fun. The first story that I ever covered in San Marino was April of 1999, so I take that back. As editor, I became sports editor in 1996. In 1999, I became editor of the Tribune, and the first story that I covered was the 50th anniversary of the death of Kathy Fiscus. And at the time, this is where I believe that she had died. This is where the memorial still is. I believe I'm sitting on the rock, or right by the rock that has that memorial. And I remember I went up there one day, it was obviously very rainy. I was just trying to get an idea of the whole scene and whatever. There's Kathy, as you know. That's Bill Deverell, who spoke here at City Club, did an amazing job because now we're on the 75th anniversary of her passing. And what Bill pointed out was there was a belief that Kathy had died, that the well was on the upper court where there's a soccer field. I had been told by somebody that was underneath that tennis court right there, and Bill Deverell says that that they've done, if you remember his speech, that they've done a lot of GPSing and they've realized that Kathy died. Right over there, yellow mark, that yellow mark there is accidental, and it's where the track meets with the high jump area there. That is the Kathy Fiscus Memorial that is located up on the upper field. And then this is one that is at the library. So that was a really, really interesting story to jump right into. And one of the first things I did was go to the 50th anniversary of her passing, which was really, really kind of a sad event. Her mother came and her sister came. Her mother was still alive, but that was a kind of a painful thing. Speaking of painful things, this happened on July 4th. And I'm sure we're all kind of aware of this story. And I don't want to bring this up due to the salacious nature of the story. But however, I'm going to show you what like gathering a story is like. So we had the Blacksmith Run. Alex Blacksmith is here. This is JP's brother. And we had the Blacksmith Run, and I went back to the Tribune, and I was writing this story. I was about to write this story. And we had saved this story in the upper left-hand part of the front page, and I was going to write some kind of drivel about the run. And so we had saved one little block in the paper, and the rest was already the printer. And so we were just kind of saving this, and we were also going to put in the race results. So this was like the last thing that I was going to do. And then head over to Lacey Park. So I'm sitting in my office, and I literally had sat down. I'm kind of sounding dramatic, but I'm not, because it's true. I sat down, and I kind of took this last breath. I go, okay, what am I going to say about this? I'm about to say something like, 800 people join the crew, whatever, and my phone rings. I'm like, thank goodness my phone rings. I don't have to write. And I pick it up, and it's a friend of mine. He goes, where are you? I said, I'm in my office. He goes, get over here right now. I go, where are you? He says, I'm over at Huntington Drive. There's a fatality. So I went over, and we all know the story. There was the alleged street race. I think that we can call it a street race now. And when I asked, and this is facing east, and you can see this is where the car came across the median and jumped the curb. This is a little bit later. You can see that there's flowers that were placed there kind of for memorial. That's one of the cars, the car that struck the young man and his dog. And you can see we've whited out the license plate so that you can't see it. There's Chief and Contour. And I wanted to ask you, John, I don't want to put you on the spot. Where were you that morning? Because you were there very, very quickly. Were you on duty? Because if you weren't, you washed your hair and got down there very quickly.
Without having hair, it's pretty easy to get dressed. I was at home, and I'm only 6 miles.
Yeah, because you were there very, very quickly, and there was a lot to do. There's no doubt about that. And there's some of his people telling him exactly what happened. This is immediately after the scene. I probably walked around there, staying behind the boundaries for the photographers. I think I probably took 100 pictures. I don't know of any other pictures that exist of that scene. When I went back to my office, I got 5 or 6 phone calls of people asking me for the photos, which I did send to several news outlets. And I think that the photos that I ended up taking are the only ones that really exist. I've been asked for the photos that I took from one of the attorneys. That is Gabriel Crispo, and that is his dog. Both of them were perished in the accident. This is a lot of his friends and family members that came for a vigil that they had a couple nights later. And one of the, if there is a silver lining inside of the dark cloud, I was sitting in my office one day, and a woman from San Marino walked in and handed me an envelope. And I go, wait. And she goes, no, just take this. And I go, hang on, what is this? And I opened it up, and she had written a check for $3,000 and written out to nobody. She goes, do you know anyone in the family? And I said, I do. And there's a young lady that I've been corresponding with from Gabriel's family. And she goes, give this to them for funeral expenses. And so she just gave $3,000 to someone she didn't know, a check with no name on it. So that was a very, very nice gesture, but a terrible story. And I even said it to somebody, yeah, it really ruined my 4th of July, like it didn't ruin other people's 4th of July. Ruining my 4th of July was nothing compared to that. It's a great young lady named Christina Chang, and I actually, I coached volleyball at San Marino for a while, and I coached her sister. And Christina's a really good soccer player. Her dad's name is Ronald Chang. I think some of you guys might know Ronald, really neat guy. They have 3 daughters, and she's the youngest of the 3 daughters. She's a very good soccer player. And Christina, all of a sudden, one day started losing her hair. She had no idea why. And so they did a lot of tests, and they realized that Christina had some kind of I can't think of the word right now, but and so she started losing all of her hair. So she got tired of losing her hair, and so she decided just to cut it off. And so she had a lot of her friends over, and she was a junior in high school. And she said, I just wanted to finish the job. I was kind of tired of it. So she kind of shaved her head. You can see a little bit of hair on her head there. But what just really I admired about Christina was she just acted like nothing happened. She went on with her life. She continued playing soccer or whatever. And I think the courage of doing that, I think of myself when I was 16 or 17 years old, and I'd have a little pimple or something like that, and I'd want to stay home from school. And the idea of what she did, all of a sudden like losing her hair, and she just kind of went through with her life. And then I asked her, I said, Christina, it's not about me. It's not about the San Marino Tribune. But I kind of would like to tell her story if you want to tell her. It's kind of tough to approach somebody in her situation, and say, if you want to tell her, I'd like to do it for you, and maybe this will help somebody. And she wanted to do it, and so I said, your pictures of me on the front page of the paper with no hair. She said, that's okay. So she went through this whole thing. She actually thanked me for doing it, and her hair has grown back. And until the Gabriel Crispo incident, this was our #1 website hit. So Christina got about 25,000 hits or something like that. And I think, I guarantee you, there were many, many people. Go ahead and get that. I need to take a breath. Thanks, Hunter. Anyone else want to make a call? Thank you. So I really admire Christina, and like I said, this young lady has changed many, many lives. Speaking of changing lives, this is Brendan Leone, and Brendan Leone was an athlete at San Marino High School, and this is a very sad story, of course. I'm sure a lot of you know it. That's Brendan intercepting a pass and starting it around the other way, and he's a very undersized young man. This is, I actually was a Facebook friend with Brendan, and this is a Facebook exchange I had with Brendan, and he had played a really, really good game, and if you can see at the bottom, he says, I can't wait for next season, and he had a really, really great attitude, really neat guy, and I actually met Brendan the Monday before he lost his life, and Brendan died in a car accident as he was kind of speed racing around the Rose Bowl, and his friends freely admit that he liked to do that on occasion. And he actually was left a party for his birthday, so it was late Saturday night, and Saturday was his birthday, and he actually lost his life on Mother's Day, so that was obviously a very tragic thing. There's Brendan in the car that he later lost his life in. These are a lot of Brendan's friends, and they went down by the Rose Bowl, and so this is located on the southwest kind of corner of that loop, and he struck that light pole there, and a lot of his friends went there every single night. They had like a long vigil, and I went there just about every night, and I was very clear with them. This is the way I drive home. I don't want you to think that I'm going that far out of my way, but I would go there every night and just kind of hang out with the guys and see what they were up to. And Brendan had a big taste for fast food, and they would just leave Burger King and stuff on that light pole just kind of for Brendan. So he was a really, really well-loved guy. Here they left notes for him, as you can see. Candles for Brendan, the CIF finalist. So he had been on that team that went to the CIF finals. This is his the morgue at Church of Our Savior, where Brendan was interred. This is a story I wrote on him after he died, famous for that smile. And the other thing was his friends loved him. What was the story that his mom wondered at one time, she goes, I made all these great lunches, and he gave them away and went to In-N-Out. So she didn't even know that. And then if you notice, they planted a tree right there, and this is kind of later, but there's still a lot of debris left. It was a very, very huge impact right there. And I go and water the tree. And so myself and his mom and dad. And then one day I went to water the tree, and some woman comes over and goes, excuse me, what are you doing? And I said, well, I knew this boy who died. And she goes, we were here that morning. And so they had come in that morning, they weren't allowed to walk. And so they started watering the tree as well. And so I've since asked the woman to reach out to the Leon family. And so now there's the Leons, the Vorsangers, and myself, and we kind of take turns. Doesn't need a lot of water right now, but in the summer we kind of take a lot of turns to make sure this is a beautiful bush. They decorated it for Christmas, and Mr. Leon goes down and keeps it very well trimmed. Mike Hobby, San Marino High School's football coach. Mike just retired this last year, and this is the first day of practice for the 2015 season. And I went to watch them literally just show up for the first day. So this is in early August, and this is a season that turned out like no other. I remember there was a guy from Blair, and he was a football coach at Blair, and his name is Porfirio Frausto, and he later became a school board member. And he had coached at Blair, and they had a couple bad seasons, and he retired, and he sort of resigned. And he said, I firmly believe that you can tell the health of a high school by the condition of its football team. And it's obvious that I'm not doing a very good job. And I actually have talked to Lauren Kleinrock about that, and he was a football coach and a principal. He goes, you know what, I've never thought about that. But it's exactly right. A good football team kind of starts the year out really, really well. And things, because ice team, they have less discipline problems when you have a good football team. And talk about a good football team, this was a really good football team. One of the neat things about this football team was like almost entirely homegrown. A lot of high school sports now, kids go into districts, they recruit kids, they don't live there, they go somewhere else. And this was, I don't even know if there was a kid who lived outside of the district. That's JP Shofi making a catch, and this is over a guy from Summit, and this is a really good team that we beat. And this kid went on to play Division I football. And there was a kid at San Marino High School who took pictures of JP catching touchdown passes over guys and showed where each one of them went. He's going to Oregon, he's going to Alabama, and JP's catching passes over all of them. JP, as you may have read, and we've covered it very extensively, one of our photographers went to Yale and did a story on JP's final game at Harvard, and JP had a phenomenal game. This is Max Abugazale, and Max just loved this flag, and he took it with him everywhere. I love this flag, and he just had the greatest attitude. He was the center on the team. This is Blake Cabot, and so in this huge game, it's to qualify for the state championship. Our quarterback gets hurt, and Blake Cabot has to go, and he's kind of a nervous sophomore, and he goes in and throws 3 touchdown passes to beat, was it Sierra Vista? Sierra Canyon, thank you. Steve and I had just announced the game 4 years ago, I can't remember. But really neat guy, Blake Cabot. And I remember talking to Hobby later on, I go, Mike, what did you have, like a special offense? He goes, hell no. I just said find JP and throw it to him. It ain't that hard. And then I didn't even know the Davises were coming, but this is their son, Chaz. I actually worked as an intern for me a year. This is Chaz. You can see that he's very happy. There's Coach Hoppy after winning the CIF championship. CIF plaque, Carson Glazier, record-setting quarterback, record-setting receiver. And there's one of our City Club members. And this is, again, the CIF plaque. So what a really great year that was. And I think that was one thing that was really interesting about that is the number of people at these games. I mean, the stadium couldn't hold any more people. And the happiness that was there, the number of letter jackets that were brought out of mothballs. I mean, I love all sports. I played a lot of sports, but there really is nothing like a high school football team that can really pull a community together. And that was a really, really neat experience. And so from the time I took that first picture, in August, it was 100 degrees. The football season ended on December 19th in Sacramento, California. So it's a really, really long season, but I loved every second. It was a lot of fun. Maybe the greatest tennis player in San Marino High School history, I will say he's the greatest tennis player in San Marino High School history, a guy named Andrew Park. Great, great athlete, went to USC, won his NCAA championship. And then this was at the time the greatest high school tennis team ever assembled, was what Tennis Magazine said. And that's Maureen Bryant, the many, many times CIF champion in the middle of the coach. Great lady who just passed away last year. Really, really neat woman. And that's that team. 3 of them went on to play pro. 5 or 6 of them went on to play college. So that was a really, really great bunch of guys. I love the Traveling Tribune. One of the great things about the Traveling Tribune is it means that I don't have to write stuff to fill that space. And I got this idea. A friend of mine went to Africa, and he had this stuffed animal, and he took it to a bunch of different places, and he took pictures of the stuffed animal on different things, and he sent it back to us. And I thought, what if I did that with the Tribune? That'd be kind of funny. And so the Traveling Tribune started in like 1998 or something like that. It's been all over the place. It's really kind of neat to just get these, things. This is the Traveling Chew family. I think they named themselves the Traveling Chews after the Traveling Tribune. And so they were just in Egypt over winter break. It always makes me, it's great that people can go to Egypt over winter break. The Traveling Tribune had the unknown effect of just to make me feel how bad my career choices are, because can I afford to go to, and I just have them constantly rubbed in my face by people who are enjoying these places. I'm like, I need a Traveling Tribune section for me, from the dollar value menu from McDonald's on Foothill Boulevard. This is kind of interesting because Mike Kalaki, is Mike here? Mike is not, City Club member. So Mike was going to Ohio this summer, and he goes, Mitch, I'm going to Ohio. And I go, I'm sorry? He goes, no, I'm going to take some Traveling Tribune pictures. I said, great. He goes, where are you from? I said, Medina. And he goes, where? I said, Medina. So his son remembered this and looked on his GPS and said, Dad, we're not far from Medina. So they went to Medina and they took this picture of a Traveling Tribune. That's a high school football stadium that I played in, named after my best friend's father who passed away. And he was actually the PA announcer of my hometown. And I've actually modeled my own PA announcing after him. He was kind of like my ideal for that. He would announce my junior high football games, and I always remembered how much it affected me. And when I got the opportunity, Mickey McNamee asked me to announce a JV football game, and I've done it ever since then, which was 1997. So there's a Traveling Tribune from Medina. And when I think Kalaki said, Mitch, what's the best part of Medina? And I said, Toronto. And I remember I went to Houston one time, and I said to the cab driver, I go, what's the best part of Houston? He goes, Galveston. And I go, so basically you're saying the best part of Houston is to leave Houston? And he goes, yeah, I guess I am. This is Michael Chan. Michael Chan was a great football player for San Marino. Michael Chan broke the rushing record for the Titans. And he broke this man's record. And this is Bert. What's Bert's last name? McKee. I knew all this earlier. And so that's Bert McKee playing for San Marino, Michael Chan playing for San Marino, number 21, number 22. And there's Bert. Bert later played college football at Cal. And there's Michael Chan. So it's kind of interesting, but when Michael was breaking his record, I found Bert's phone number, and I wanted to do a story, and I called Bert. And there's all this kind of wind noise in the background. I go, Bert, Mitch Lehman. He goes, yeah, right. Yeah. And I go, no, Mitch Lehman. And somebody goes, yeah, Mitch, how are you? I go, I'm good. Listen, I want to ask you a couple questions. And so Bert was actually on a fishing trip in Mexico, hence all the wind. Bert had maybe a couple beers, and he didn't want to talk about this very much. But mostly Bert thought that people were putting him on. He didn't believe that I was really Mitch and wanted to write a story about him. He thought that I was some of his friends. who were trying to get him to say things he didn't want to say. Bert eventually did realize that it was me, that it wasn't a goof. And so I did a story about Bert and Michael, and I thought that was kind of fascinating. Here's Michael playing at Temple City, and in Michael's entire football career, he played on natural grass one time, and it was at Temple City. And Michael was jumping in the mud because he liked the mud and he wanted to get dirty because he'd never played on natural grass before. So here's Bert and Michael, and I got them together to high school and took some pictures of them and wrote a story. And it was really amazing the similarities between the two, and they're kind of the same size. They kind of ran the same way. They had very similar statistics. I got Michael to, looks like Bert is handing the title to Michael in a way, or Michael is taking the title. So I was trying to get a little bit, heady with the pictures there. You see them, they're pretty much the same size. And then this one is the one I actually used for the article. At one point, Bert took Michael aside and said, Michael, just enjoy this. It's going to end sometime. Just enjoy this experience. And so they had a really, really neat relationship, very, short term actually. But what was kind of neat is when I showed up, Bert was looking at the field turf at San Marino High School. He's fascinated by the pebbles in the field turf. And Michael's fascinated in the mud of the... So there were all these things that were kind of coming together. Obviously, a different overtone is you've got a white guy from it was a predominantly white school when he set the record, and it was broken by a Chinese young man. It doesn't matter to me what they are, but I just thought it was very, very interesting and a really, really neat story. Actually won first place in the state contest. I was kind of very proud of that. And it was called Kindred Spirits. And they're there. Look at Lauren. See, look at Lauren's got another job. Climbing up back at SMUSD as part-time consultant. Lauren's going to read that, and he's going to show up on Monday morning. This is Ray Chang, and look at Ray is 4'2", and Ray this is when Ray was a freshman, and you can see him next to this guy from La Cañada, a really, really undersized guy. And a really amazing athlete, and I really took a liking to Ray very, very early, and he played soccer, and he played volleyball. Ray eventually grew to a little bit normal height. Ray grew to about 5'6", because here he's playing volleyball and playing in the front row, and that's kind of odd for someone his size. That's a little bit undersized. Ray had a tremendous vertical jump and a really, really tough kid. So Ray got accepted to West Point, and he was going to go to West Point, and I did a story about him. You can see he'll stand tall in the long gray line. They call it the long gray line, is what they call the cadets. And so Ray showed up at West Point in July. And over the summer, Ray had a pretty serious allergic reaction. And they were doing the screening, and Ray literally walks through into a couple of rooms, and the doctor pulls him into a room and says, "Have you visited an emergency room?" And he said, "Yes." And Ray had the opportunity probably to say no, but Ray had told me he had already called his counselor at West Point because they said, if you do this, you might be disqualified. So Ray got disqualified from West Point. His entire trip there was about 3 hours. In fact, I believe his mother was heading back to, the mother and brother were heading back to the airport. I called them back to take him back to San Marino. Ray got home, really didn't know what to do. This is a picture I took of Ray for the story, The Long Gray Line. Before Ray went to West Point, he spoke at Memorial Day, talked about all his hopes and goals for the Army. This is at West Point. A kid from San Marino gave me an Army volleyball shirt, and I just gave it to Ray at grad night. So that's Ray's final grad night. And then, so Ray has to come back and is not allowed to go to West Point. And he was very depressed. And Ray kind of pulled himself together. He coached. And he started a web series and a podcast to help kids who had been bullied. And so Ray, kind of amazingly, I think that Ray is the one person in the world who may do more by being disqualified from the Army than many people are who will go all the way through it. And so about a year later, Ray agreed to a story called Blessing in Disguise. And Ray said that being medically disqualified was a great thing for him and allowed him to maybe affect more lives. So Kelly talked about underdogs. This is one of those. Said I wasn't going to cry. Damn you, Dennis. Just plain Dennis. A really interesting story that happened a long time ago. And there was a kidnapping in San Marino. Happened right up here above Starbucks. And there was a family, and there was a husband and wife, and they both owned companies in the garment industry. And some of the employees got together, and they kidnapped their kid. And I actually had heard about this, and I walked up and took this picture, and there's police tape around the car. It was black and white even. And that was the only photo ever taken of that. And so this was a very interesting case because it was one of the first times that certain technology was used to crack the case. And so they were triangulating this guy's phone. They were actually in San Gabriel to make the drop for the ransom money. It was a big ransom, it was a couple $1 million or something like that. And they actually were able to track him to a certain place, and they arrested him. So they actually busted this case. The San Marino police played a pretty big part in that. But the interesting part about it is I remember that they were barbecuing every night in the police station, the fire station. And I go back to my car, this is when we were right next to the fire station, there's all this great food smelling stuff going on. It turned out it was the FBI who was there setting up. They have all the good stuff, I guess. There's me in the middle, bottom. Remember this picture? I have so much ADD that I have to hold a car to be good. My brother to my left there is Down syndrome. Remember him for later. And this is my brother, a hero of mine, who served a lot of time in Vietnam. This is my father, the Major Dennis Lehman, who was a B-27 bomber pilot in World War II, flew on D-Day. And I remember this past, the 75th anniversary of D-Day, I put a post on Instagram. I said, do you know where your father was 75 years ago? I do. So very proud of my father. And so I come from a family with a little bit of a military background. I myself never served. It's one of the few, I don't know if I can even call it regret, but looking back, I kind of wish that I would have done something. I registered for the draft, but that was about it. There was really not much to fight at the time. So in 1999, I went over to Lacey Park on Memorial Day and wanted to cover San Marino's Memorial Day ceremony, which there was none. And all there was is someone had put this rose up on top of the then war memorial, which was very insignificant. And I read this caption earlier today. It said that 42 San Marino residents lost their lives. Oh, that was World War II alone. So I was really mad that there was no Memorial Day service. And I was mad that we had this crappy war memorial. So I started to look into maybe getting a new one. Here's some drawings for it. Here's another one. This is kind of what it ends up looking like. Here's a new war memorial that is under construction at the time. This is it before all the plates were put in. And this is Francis Barker. Francis Barker was a San Marino resident who passed away. And he was a survivor of the Bataan Death March, and a really, really neat guy. Came to all the patriotic events in town, and a really neat guy. And here's Francis on the right. And he's writing the very first check for the war memorial, his donation, giving it to Dennis Neer. And how shocking to get a picture of Dennis Neer raising money for a good project in San Marino. Almost unbelievable. And there's former Mayor Gene Dryden, who just passed away on the left. And Gene was the chair of the committee to do this as well. This is a day that we, for lack of a better word, dedicated the war memorial. Largest crowd I've ever seen at Lacey Park. Overflow crowd. Really, really neat day. And this is Francis on the right, and this is J.P. Blessmith's mother on the left. They were both suffering from cancer. They both lost their lives not long after that. But this is them dedicating the war memorial and taking showing the statue for the first time. This is people going up to see the new war memorial. And interestingly enough, on the back of it, as you know, I think you can buy names for the war memorial. Francis Barker bought 5 names, and there's just first names or last names, or people that he met while he was in the Army, and he just wanted to memorialize them in some way, so that it'll just say like Joe back there, Hutch or something like that. So really, really neat. But a project that I was involved in and very, very proud of. I had mentioned to somebody at one time, I said, you can forget everything I've ever said. You can burn everything I've ever written. But if I've done anything to give people in San Marino a place to honor those who gave their lives for our country, my time here has not been completely in vain. Completely in vain. So this year we found out that after 52 people had given their lives, it turns out that there's another person who had given their life, and he died in Pearl Harbor, in the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's John Carley right in the middle. And Michael Throne is here. First of all, Michael, I find it interesting that your biggest project that you've been working on is the Lacey Park restrooms, and your last name is Throne, but I appreciate all you've done. But Michael, Veterans Day, November 11th of 2004. And I will never forget the response in the community. This is a Church of Our Savior for his funeral. And there just simply was not a place to park. There was not a place to stand almost in all of San Marino. This is inside the Blacksmith House, and that's his jersey. And I remember I was over there one day, and Pam was there, and they made the 900th delivery of flowers. And Pam said, and imagine, we said no flowers, please. And people did not listen to that for good reason. Here's Alex, and this is at the dedication of the War Memorial. The War Memorial was a project that did very, very well as far as getting the fundraising for it. Dennis told me once it's the easiest one he ever raised. We raised too much, put it in a maintenance fund for the War Memorial. And so much of that was JP sadly had passed away after we started the project. And there's JP's name at the bottom of the thing. Many projects have come from JP's passing. This is a student at LaSalle, started a project, this is a sketch project. And there you can see him with this sketch of JP. JP is memorialized in several different places. That is at Flint Ridge Prep where he went to school. Same picture of JP. We now, of course, do the Blacksmith Run in honor of JP. We had a 5K run for the Tribune, and we had it for a couple different charities, and it really didn't catch on for any of them. But Mary Gilball and Mary's parents are here. Mary called me one day and said, Mitch, could we use your run as kind of a qualifying run for the Marine Marathon? I go, you can have the run. Let's just make it the JP Blacksmith Memorial 5K walk and run. And we've done that. And 800-900 people do it now here. And so it's turning into kind of a nice event on July 4th. When's this year's? July 4th. Here's some people running in it. The San Marino Garden Club planted like 1 million trees in the Angeles National Forest or something like that in JP's honor. And then this is interesting, but, and now tell me if I get this wrong, but when JP lost his life, they took his remains and all of his gear, and this is a camera that he had, and this is the last shot on the camera, I believe, and so this is possibly around the last time that JP was alive. Am I close on that? Yeah, and so this came out much longer, and this is taken from a rooftop in Fallujah from a camera that JP took. One of the things I love about San Marino, so you showed you the picture of my brother, and you can see why I admire those who have served in our armed forces, and I had a brother with Down syndrome, and so I was blessed to have a brother with Down syndrome. It's like just a wonderful experience to grow up with a young man like that. This is a club that, this is several years ago at San Marino High School, and it's called Friends Incorporated, and their entire mission is to serve the special needs community at San Marino High School, and they just do a lot of amazing things. They have a lot of events. They have musical things for kids with special needs, and how they treat the special needs kids at the school is just amazing. Here's 2 cheerleaders, both of them with special needs, who are fantastic. They're never on beat with the other cheerleaders, not even close. And thank God for it, because you can always see where they are. And they've got the most beautiful smiles and the most enthusiastic cheerleaders that we have, Cece and Laura. San Marino again, there's little Paul, and little Paul's bike gets stolen from City Hall, which I find ironic. And we're gonna talk about that. John and Connor just ran into the men's room. John, we have extra time. Would you come here and explain this to us? And San Marino's firefighters and Rotarians. I was at a meeting when this was brought up that Paul's bike was stolen, and all of a sudden I had literally like $400 cash in my hand, and give that to little Paul. And then this is our firefighters that are volunteering at Special Olympics. This is a group at a run for Danny's farm, and Danny got a young man with autism from San Marino. And this entire charity is based on Danny's life. There's Dancing David Tyree, and we love David. If you ever go to the football games or basketball games, David is also Down syndrome like my brother. He's a great dancer. He goes out and entertains the fans. There's little Paul. This amazing young lady in San Marino, Lisa Lou. Lisa Lou has started a non-smoking campaign, and 2 bills that she has helped write were both passed by the California State Senate. And this is a senior in San Marino High School, she's an amazing young lady. And she was in Taiwan, and she noticed that she felt that there were too many young people who were smoking and vaping, so she decided to bring this charity back to San Marino. It's really gone a long way, and there they are with Catherine Barger. All of them just amazing. The person to the left of Catherine also, her name is Kimia Hasibi, very, very involved in that charity and others. And here's my friend, oh no, Winnie just almost fainted. There's Winnie right now. And Winnie, very special to San Marino, and something Winnie did last year. There was a need that was identified in San Marino, and our fire department was hoping to find a way to finance this CPR machine. It's kind of like a jacket that they just put in someone who needs CPR. It actually gives automatic CPR, and as Chief Rueda pointed out, it can give CPR better than a human being can give CPR. So this jacket just goes around the patient, and it kind of gives automatic CPR. And then it allows other firefighters to go and do different things. And I asked Chief Rueda if he's used it, and he says yes, and he's used it to great success from what I understand. So Winnie volunteered to step up and to fund the first of these. And so the firefighters held a little lunch for Winnie. And that's Winnie on the phone calling the other firefighters in for lunch. And I'm not sure if it was Winnie or firefighters really like lunch, but they were there in about 3 seconds. So. Come and get it. What's that? You come and get it? Yes, she did. And so Winnie and her son John were there. But what a wonderful thing. Winnie's husband Lynn was a mayor of San Marino, and when he was mayor is when San Marino started their paramedic program. And so I would really think this is something that kind of ties that circle all together. And just an amazing, yeah, please. One of the firefighters there was actually there, I believe, that gave you the news that Lynn had passed away. And Dominic was also there for these lunches and these events that you visit. And that was very sweet to see the two of you together again. Okay, so I promised you a top 10 list. And I didn't want to do it. And I gave this a great deal of thought. And when Kelly and I talked about what would be the subject of my talk, Kelly said, Mitch, do a top 10 list. Do a top 10 list of the top 10 stories that you covered in San Marino. I thought this would be really neat. I thought it'd be really interesting. And like I said, I put it in the paper, and I got so many unsolicited comments about what they thought should go in the top 10 list. And so I've got one, but before I get there, I want to, and I'm reaching my time. Kelly, I'm not doing nearly as bad as I thought I was going to do. Right? Thank you for that extra 5 minutes. Oh, wait, these are my jokes. Sorry, that's where they belong. They just have Jim Angelos' name crossed off and my name on them. Okay. So I did write this one part, and only so that I got it right. Or as right as it can be out of my hand. As you may have surmised by now, I was an English major in college. I remember during one particularly scintillating medieval literature class at Loyola Marymount, and we were studying Dante's Inferno. If you don't know anything about Dante's Inferno, it's where the writer communicates his vision of hell and assigns contemporary politicians and leaders different stations or levels in hell, replete with colorful explanations of the particular punishments that are dished out to each offender. Dante also wrote Purgatorio and Paradiso, but nobody pays any attention to them, said our professor, Dr. DeVrome. They're too boring. Our vices are much more interesting than our virtues. A few years later, I was with a group of people in a team building situation. The moderator wanted us to verbalize to the rest of the group and answer this question. If you knew you had just one day left to live, how would you spend it? I was a little surprised by some of the answers from a group of people I knew quite well. Most seemed to want to blend together a combination of their greatest experiences and pile them all into a single day. I chose a typical day, just a normal day, and I was very happy with that. I felt it meant that I was a truly happy person, and for some reason enjoyed my day-to-day life. I didn't even choose a special restaurant for my last meal, though I do recall wanting key lime pie for my final dessert. So I was asked to provide a list of the top 10 stories that have taken place in the city of San Marino since I started writing for the Tribune on September 3rd, 1996. And I'll do that in just a minute. But I'm amazed by the many phone calls, emails, and text messages I've received, either wanting to know what I'm going to say or providing unsolicited advice about what they think I should say. Mitch, is it the house fire, the DEA shooting, or the fake Rockefeller? I won't deny stories like these exist, and I'll cover them if I must. But I don't really think any of these events even come close to defining San Marino, a city that is sensational in its rather mundane, everyday existence. So here we go, very unsensational and very mundane. Not Winnie, of course, she's sensational in her own right. So There's no order to these, but I believe the volunteerism in San Marino is just beyond even any understanding. This is Valerie Weiss receiving the Alumni Service Award from USC. She was also the Tribune's Citizen of the Year in 2007. The San Marino Motor Classic has given $2.3 million for charities and is all volunteer driven. If you see the upcoming Founders Day Awards as well, you're going to see that it honors the thousands and thousands of volunteer hours. And so volunteerism, clearly one of the top 10 things that I've experienced in San Marino. Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, consistently they're above the norm when it comes to the number of girls who receive their Gold Award and the number of boys who achieve the Eagle. The annual Girl Scout Award ceremony is May 19th in the Kenneth F. White Auditorium at Huntington Middle School. Really encourage you to go see it. It's amazing, these Gold Award projects that these young people do. So again, another thing that I just am blown away by in San Marino, and that is the dedication to the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. So this is Susie Kroll unveiling the San Marino Public Library, and there's the Barth family cutting the ribbon on the new gymnasium, the athletic center. So Susie Kroll and Andy Barth and his family addressed two of the largest needs in the community, donating for a new library and a new gymnasium in Huntington Middle School. I hate the fact that this is the fundraising model in San Marino. It means kind of write a check and we'll try to fill in the rest. But as long as it is, these people have stepped up and they've filled the gap. And they're two very, very beautiful facilities. The Schools Foundation. San Marino School Foundation raises $2 million a year, and I believe it's just gone over the $50 million mark in its rich history of supporting our schools. The San Marino Schools Foundation is the only one in the state of California. So the San Marino's budget actually budgets and is allowed to budget $2 million for the Schools Foundation. No other district in the nations except San Marino is the only one, because the Schools Foundation has been that regular in helping the school district. It is right in San Marino's budget, and it's the only one. The Centennial. So former Mayor Mary Simmons said, you know, we have to celebrate this centennial, and she started putting a lot of money away. And I believe that, Liz, were you the citizen chair for San Marino? Those years doing nasty things again, you know. One of the things I want to point about Dennis, when Dennis threw the poop, I noticed today, he threw it with his left hand. But in his, I didn't know he was a left-handed poop thrower. But what nobody noticed, all these people want to bash Dennis. In his right hand, he was carrying a briefcase from a meeting in Lacey Park for the Motor Classic. Isn't that right? Yeah, so people want to talk about that poop, but they don't want to talk about the fact that he was there so he could donate to the school, or help the Motor Classic. So the Centennial was a great time in San Marino. I really, really enjoyed that. I think a lot of people enjoyed that. I think that one of the great events of the Centennial was that thing at the Huntington Library. That was really, really neat. Grad night. So grad night is amazing, I think. And this is Cheryl Cabot, Cynthia Airy, Tina McCall, and Michelle Carter. And this is a couple years ago, I think. What is a passport around the world? Is that 2 years ago, Beth? And speaking of Beth, I didn't know the Davises were here, and I've already got a picture of their son. And now I'm going to mention Beth. Beth is this your third time as grad night chair? Yes. So this is Beth. Yeah, give her a round of applause. Third year as grad night chair. So she has been the grad night chair for both of her sons and now her daughter Grace. So good job, Beth. So also it began in 1956 and it was called Carnival Francois. Very first grad night. And this year it's going to be Finding Nemo. So Beth, have we found Nemo yet? We'll find Nemo on June 1st or June 2nd, whenever it is. And ironically, I was writing or editing an obituary today, and a woman died. Her name was Helen Bolton. She was 103 years old, and she was a founding member of the very first grad night committee in 1956. So you'll see her obituaries, sadly. There's a picture of grad night. That's the kind of final number of grad night when all the confetti comes down and people start heading for the donuts. And you can see that half of them on their phones, which means grad night's almost over. The Chinese Club of San Marino just celebrated their 40th year. Very influential in the community, in the Chinese school on grad night, and the Mid-Autumn Festival, not grad night, Mid-Autumn Festival are two of the greatest events in the city. And so what the Chinese Club gives to San Marino is just totally invaluable. Little League. So Little League is softball and baseball. This is the best Little League in Southern California. And that is, by statistics, San Marino's participation in Little League is amazing. 500 kids out of 14,000 in the city. That's amazing. There are cities of 50,000 people that have 200 participants. San Marino's Little League grades out at the top in any way that you look at it. And also mostly talked to a recent district administrator in volunteer hours, just is absolutely off the charts. San Marino has other great programs. The AYSO is very good, and SMCAA, outstanding too. Championship Sunday, Jay. This Sunday is the basketball championships at San Marino High School. Those are a lot of fun. I know that every first boy has been in those at some point. So another great program is the SMCAA, and the flag football is just incredible. Great program. The San Marino Unified School District, 18 years, it's been the #1 district, the #1 unified school district in the state. And the state changed the standards to try to catch San Marino. So San Marino does too well. So they changed the standards. So San Marino does well on testing, and they say, well, we're not going to test on testing anymore. We're going to test on improvement to try to give this award to somebody else. And San Marino will start with 95%, they'll make it to 98%, and they've been able to achieve. So for the past 18 years, by one standard or another, San Marino's been the #1 unified school district in the state of California. And why our girls soccer team represents the San Marino Unified School District, I have no idea, but it's as good as anything else, right? And then JP Blessneth, and I just don't think that there's anything else that I can say about JP that needs to be said about JP. But he's a young man who unified this town, and it's amazing for as long as he's been gone, just still an influence on this community and on this world. So that's it. Thank you.
See, I think we'd all congratulate Mitch on a very fine speech. On behalf of the City Club, I'd like to thank you. I'd give you a nice trophy, but they didn't give me one to give you. Anyway, thank you very much for attending. Good night, all. Good job.
We're close to time, aren't we?